Elvis tried to steal Dolly's dollar. So how did she actually keep her money in her pocket?
Hello, and welcome to Whose Song Is It Anyway? Hosted by me, creative industries legal expert Dr. Hayley Bosher. I'll be your guide to the big legal questions shaping the music and creative industries right now. Think of this as your weekly dose of all things copyright, ownership, and intellectual property.
Dolly Parton, not only the holder of 11 Grammy Awards, 3 Emmy Awards, but also my copyright hero. She's a businesswoman who knows how to manage her copyright, and that's why I love her for many other reasons. And I'm going to tell you about why that is today. And the other great thing about this Dolly story is that it really helps you to understand a bit about the different copyrights in a song and how different people involved in the making of a song can get paid. So you probably know that Dolly Parton wrote I Will Always Love You and Jolene, massive hits, in one day. In one day, one day's work. I won't sing working 9 to 5. One day's work, one day's 9 to 5 work for Dolly Parton is writing 2 hit records by herself. She's incredible. So then she goes on to release these songs, and I Will Always Love You is a fairly big hit for her in country music, her style of music. And it does well, she's doing well in her career. And then Elvis comes along and he wants to record a pop version of I Will Always Love You. Now, the important thing to know here is that Dolly loves Elvis. She's a huge Elvis fan, and she is absolutely pumped that he wants to record a version of her song. So she's telling everybody, she's so excited it's going to happen. But the day before Elvis was supposed to come into the studio and record his version of I Will Always Love You, Dolly gets a call from her manager, his manager, and they say to her, in almost like an offhand way, well, Elvis will get 50% of the publishing. And Dolly's like, sorry, what? I don't think so. But they're like, well, this is how Elvis rolls. He's Elvis at this point. He's a superstar. He has lots of power and leverage. And so when he records a copy of your song, he expects 50% of the publishing, or what we call in copyright, the musical work, copyright, royalties. And Dolly has to decide, is she going to let Elvis record her song, which she's absolutely buzzing about, but take 50% of her songwriting royalties? Or say no to Elvis and keep the song for herself? She decided to say no to Elvis, which is huge. This is why she's such a good copyright manager, because even though it was such an attractive offer, like she was a big fan of Elvis, she was so excited, she told everyone, and she wanted to do it, but she decided to think with longevity and think about the fact that it was her song and she wrote it and she wanted to keep her publishing royalties, her songwriting royalties. So she said no. Years later, Whitney Houston sings I Will Always Love You on The Bodyguard, the movie, and it stays at number 1 for a then hit record-breaking 14 weeks. So it does amazingly well with Whitney, and Dolly gets 100% of the songwriting royalties for every time that song made money. Whitney is recording on the song. She's the performer. And so she gets paid through her record label and also receives royalties for her performance on the sound recording. But Dolly gets all of the money from the songwriting royalty. So remember from the last episode, I talked about we had the musical copyright, which is the song, the composition, and that goes to the songwriter initially. And then we have the sound recording copyright, which is sometimes owned by the record label. And that's the recording of the musical work. So the track, the actual track of the song has its own copyright as well. So we have these 2 copyrights. Dolly writes the song, so she has the copyright in the musical work. Sometimes people call it the publishing right because you can license the right in the musical work as the songwriter to a publisher who will help you get licensing deals and get your song out there and pay you royalties back. So that's why it's sometimes colloquially in the music industry called the publishing right. But in the copyright lingo, it's called a musical work. And it's owned initially by the songwriter. Okay. And then the sound recording has its own separate copyright. So Dolly has rights in the sound recording of her original country version, but she doesn't have any right in the sound recording of the Whitney Houston version because she's not singing that. Whitney Houston is singing it. And the record label, who would have paid for the studio time and paid for the arrangements of the recording, they would have rights in the sound recording, and Whitney would also have got paid something for being the performer on it. So as a creator, a music creator, or any creator really, what kind of royalties are there and how do we actually get paid? So as a music maker, you, depending on your role within the creation of the piece of music, you might get different rights. But what's always good to bear in mind is that you might be all of the things. I think this is something that people often don't realize, is that when you think of yourself as a creator, you might be thinking like, yes, I'm a songwriter, or yes, I am a producer. But when you really look at it from a copyright perspective, from a royalties perspective, you actually contribute to the production and the songwriting. That might be what you're doing in the room, but you don't think of yourself as that because it's maybe not your primary skill or asset. So it's really good to have in mind what the rights are and what you're entitled to as those different roles, and then honestly look at yourself and what you contribute in the studio to be like, actually, am I contributing to the production? Like, should I be getting paid for that too? Sometimes it almost feels too good to be true. If you're an independent artist, you get paid as if you are also the publisher and record label. That money comes to you as well. And it's like, am I being paid double? But you're not. You're just being paid what you're entitled to because you're doing all of the jobs as an independent artist or creator that you would be giving to the record label or the publisher, the kind of third-party distributor, but you're doing it yourself. So you also get that money. So what kind of royalties are there? You can get royalties from your copyright creation, whether that's a book or a song, through sales. It's pretty standard, basic, most obvious starting point. So when you sell a book or you sell an album, some of that money should, in a dream world, if you've got the right contracts in place, trickle down to the creator. When you sell your creative work, whether that's a painting, a book, or a song, you obviously get a share of that sale. So you might not get all of that sale if there are other people involved in the creation of that thing or the distribution of that thing. So, for example, if you are the songwriter, but you've worked with a label, they're going to take a cut. If you have a manager, they're likely to take 10%. If you have a distributor, different people who are engaged in the process will take a share, but you should, as the creator, obviously get a share of the sales. But you also receive royalties for if the music is played in public. So like performed, live music performed in a bar, in a restaurant, there's royalties to be collected there. When your music is streamed, when your music is synced. So that's when you have a license deal where your music is synced alongside an advert, a game, or a film. And that can be really lucrative for musicians, artists, performers, if you've got the right deals in place. How do I actually get paid when the music is used? Well, the answer is through those contracts. So we're talking about copyright all the time, but contracts is how copyright is managed. The one way that you can get paid through the use of your work is through joining a collecting society. So a collecting society is a collective organisation that goes around collecting royalties on behalf of its creators and then distributing them for the use of your work. And there's collecting societies for all types of copyright protected works. there's the music ones, but then there's also the Authors Licensing Collecting Society. So when I sell lots of copies of my book, I'll get some royalties from my book publisher, Edward Elgar, but I'll also get royalties from the Authors Licensing Collecting Society, which is for when my book is photocopied and like secondary uses of the book.
Just me interrupting myself to let you know that if you're looking for a guide to navigating the world of copyright in music and the creative industries, you can pick up the new edition of my book, Copyright in the Music Industry. In it, I share everything you need to know about copyright, intellectual property, and more on navigating the world of AI. And I go into much further detail about the topics I've spoken about today. It's straightforward, digestible, and most importantly, will empower you to make the right moves to protect your own work. I'll leave the link in the episode description for you to pick up your copy.
Where does the money go? When we think about our subscription that we pay to Spotify, some people pay $9.99. Some people on the student one, it's like $5.99. The family one, it varies, but it's not a lot. How does that money go from somebody paying a subscription to a streaming service into the pocket of a music creator? And what's the share of that? You probably see on headlines all the time, people are like, oh, it's 0.000000001 per stream for how much an artist gets paid. And that may be true for some people. In reality, it does depend on the contract and the deal that they're on with their record label publisher, or if they're independent. Some people might just get zero if they're on an unrecouped contract and they're still paying back the money that the record label loaned them to make the record in the first place. But some people might get more because they might be on a generous contract. But basically, the way that it happens, the way it gets from A to B, it's more like A to H, is that Spotify don't actually contract or pay directly any artists or songwriters. They go through the rights holders. So that might be your record label, if you're signed to a label, publisher, if you're signed to a publisher, or distributor, if you're independent. So Spotify pull all the subscriptions together. So all our money that we pay to subscribe to Spotify or any streaming service really, but Spotify is the one that we know the most about because it has the most public data and was kind of referenced the most during the UK streaming inquiry. So Spotify pull all of the money together and then calculate the number of streams for each artist's account per month. They don't pay the artist directly at all. They pay out to the rights holders, as I said. So that might be the record label, the distributor, and the collecting societies. How it gets from this kind of intermediary company into the pocket of the artist or performer will depend on their deal between the artist and the record label, for example. So if you're on a deal with a record label where you have an unrecouped balance, meaning that they paid you an upfront fee when they first signed you to be like, here's loads of money to go and record an album and like live during that time. Very exciting, but it's actually a loan. So you have to pay all that money back with your royalties, in which case you can stream all of you like over here, but until you've paid off that balance, you get zero royalties. Once and if you pay off that recoupable balance, then the amount of royalties you will receive will depend on whatever it says in the contract is your royalty rate. And that will be different for different people because it depends on how you negotiated it, whether it's your first contract or your third contract, what leverage you had, etc. during the negotiation. So it will entirely depend on what that contract says. We also know that for some services such as Spotify, you need at least 1,000 streams in order to get any royalties as like a minimum threshold. Other services do calculate their royalties differently, like SoundCloud do it differently, Deezer do it differently. But to give you more specifics about how that money is divided, for Spotify, we know that the money pooled by the subscribers, 30% goes to Spotify for running the Spotify service. And then the remaining 70% gets split between the rights holders. And the rights holders are for the musical work and the sound recording. But weirdly, it's not 50-50, which is potentially controversial, because some people would argue that one of these is maybe more important than the other. Some people might argue that it's equal. But the way that Spotify pays out is roughly 2/3 to the recording, so the sound recording right, and 1/5 to the publishing, so the musical. And they will also pay out to distributors, so for independent artists as well. And then the publishing rights holder will keep some for themselves and then give some to their signed artists, signed songwriters, and the record labels will obviously keep some for themselves and then pay out on that royalty or contract basis, depending on the artist. So that's how the money trickles down, ideally, from us paying our subscription to the artist. What that means for you, if you listen to music and you think that your money is going to the artist that you listen to, that's probably not true. It's an overall pooling system, and it's the contracts that are negotiated that decide where your money goes, means that it's not necessarily directly related to what you're listening to. The record labels and the publishers and the distributors negotiate their terms with Spotify. There's no artists or songwriters involved in that negotiation. We don't even know what those contracts say because it's secret. But we do know the overall percentages because that information is public. Because of the streaming inquiry, lots of this came to light, but we don't know the details of those contracts. And we're not privy to that as a creator. Individual creators negotiate their contract with their publisher, record label. Distributors don't typically negotiate. They just have these terms and you agree to them or you don't. But you, as a subscriber to a streaming service, don't actually necessarily dictate where the money goes. I think people are shocked to find that out. I think we presume that if I'm listening all day long to my favorite artist, Dolly Parton, for example, I was thinking that that money would go, my $9.99 would go to Dolly, but it doesn't necessarily. So this is how it's divided up. There's two main collecting societies relating to the two different types of copyright works. So we've got the songwriter who owns the musical work, sometimes referred to as publishing, and their collecting society is PRS for music. So PRS collect royalties for the songwriters and the publishers. Then there's PPL. So PPL collect royalties for the performers and the copyright holders of the sound recording. So the record label, if there is one. And then there is MCPS, which is almost like one that goes between the two, because when you take the song and you put it onto a CD, for example, that's MCPS. So they pay when the work is copied into a physical product, like a CD or a DVD, just as an example. So PRS pay when the song is performed live, for example, in a bar or a restaurant. So that's when it's performed or played in public. They'll collect licenses, payments from bars and restaurants, and then distribute it if your song is performed. So if you perform at a festival, you tell PRS, my song was performed. You get your money for paying at the festival, and then you also get royalties, because if you performed your song, you can also get PRS royalty for that. So we know that if we're a songwriter, we're going to sign up to PRS, and when our music is performed live, we're going to get a royalty payment for that. It costs £100 to sign up to PRS for music, or it's £30 if you're under 25. So I would say sign up to PRS if you know that your music is being performed or played in public. You can also go to their website and find out more. They have this really good Get Paid guide that tells you loads more details. So that's really helpful. Go and look at that if you think that may apply to you, and sign up if it does, because it costs £100. So if your song's not yet being performed in public, maybe you hold off until then. PPL is actually free to sign up, so less risk, and they take a cut from the royalties that they pay out to you for the cost of the admin of running the collecting society. So you can go and look and see if you need to sign up for any of these three if you're in the UK. If you're outside of the UK, you will have your own collecting societies that collect on your behalf for your jurisdiction, your country. If you're based in the UK, but your music is played in other countries, PRS will collect that for you. But if you are based in another country and your main audience is in that country, it's better for you to just use your local collecting society. So you can sign up to lots of different collecting societies around the world, depending on whether your music is used there, whether you're based there, whether it's relevant to you. If you're in other countries, you will want to look up what your relevant collecting society is, but in almost all countries around the world, there is one for you. Likewise, if you are a different type of creator, so for example, an author or a painter or a designer, you want to look up the other collecting societies that might be relevant to the thing that you do. You might need to sign up to more than one because PRS is for the songwriters, PPL is for the performers. You might be both of those things, so then you would need to sign up to both. Likewise, PRS pays out to the songwriter and to the publisher. If you're an independent artist, that's you twice. Same as if you're the performer, PPL will pay out to the performer and to the record label. So if you're an independent artist and you don't have a record label, that's you twice. So you could get paid 4 times, potentially. Maybe even 5 times if you add MCPS on there. So it's really, really useful to know what your relevant collecting societies are. Sign up to the ones where your music or creation is actually being used in that area. And it's a lovely income stream, just shows up in your bank every now and again. The one tip I would say is that these things only work if you're on top of the admin. So as boring as it sounds, it's really important to make sure that your account is up to date, your bank details are up to date, and really simple things can throw the whole thing askew. For example, if you have a different performer name as your own name, or you have variations of your name where like sometimes you use a middle name, sometimes you use an initial, you need to be consistent so that the system doesn't accidentally pay somebody else with the same name as you. And that brings me on nicely to my next point. There are these things called identifiers. Now, people who know my hesitation. There are loads of them. They're very confusing. It's all acronyms: ISWC, ISRC, IPI, IPN, ISNI. All you need to know is this at this point. The codes are a bit like a code for your bank account, like your sort code or account number for your bank, right? And then you have another code on your actual bank card. So when you go into the shop, there's a code on the item you're purchasing, like a barcode. You'll scan that, and then they'll scan your bank card so that you can pay for that thing. They'll know to take the money out of that exact bank account, which is yours. So these codes are kind of like the opposite. How do we know to pay you for the use of your specific song or track, whether it's the sound recording or the musical work? It's done with codes. And yes, they're a nightmare and it's confusing. And there's not like an international standard. You know, I feel you. It's not easy. It's not straightforward. However, it is absolutely essential that you know your codes. Okay. So I wish I could give you like a quick, easy way to remember them all. But honestly, I don't even have one. What I do, the trick is just write it down. I've written it down for you. If you've got a copy of my book, it's on page 101. So there's a list and it's there. But you can also search it online. And honestly, once you get to grips with your codes and you're not going to remember it off by heart anyway, because it's long code. You just write it down and then it's there ready for you, on your notes app in your phone or something, so that when you need your code, for example, you'll need your code for your collecting society, or when you're doing a split sheet, which we'll talk more about in another episode, so that you can get paid your share. That's what you need the code for. So I will just very briefly, try not to bore you, but I will just very briefly go through what each of the codes are so that you hear it from me, so that you can maybe hear it, maybe think about which ones you need and how to find them. But honestly, you're not going to remember it. It's not something that you're just going to hear at one time and be like, nailed it. Even I write it down. It's not something I know off the top of my head. And I've been doing this for a really long time. So I don't know, maybe artists and performers who are on it with their admin, maybe they know it. But I would just recommend writing it down, finding out what your numbers are, being on top of your admin. Okay, so there is the ISWC, which stands for International Standard Musical Work Code. Catchy. This one is for the musical work. So that's the musical composition, the song itself, and it's assigned by your collecting society. Then there is ISRC, and that stands for International Standard Recording Code. I feel like you're already with me now. I've said it so many times that you can get that this is for the sound recording. So this is the other right. And this can be provided by either the distributor, the record label, or PPL, if you're an independent artist. And that's the collecting society that's relevant to the recording, remember. Okay, then the third one is IPI, Interested Party Information. This is the unique identifier for songwriters and publishers. So that's back on the musical side. The one that some people, it used to be called CAE, if you've heard of that one before. And basically it was meaning composer, author, or editor. So CAE, that's what that stood for. So that's maybe a way to remember it. And these are also assigned by your collecting society. Then there's IPN, International Performer Number. So this is a unique identifier for the performers on the track, also assigned by the collecting society. And then ISNI, International Standard Name Identifier. And this is the unique identifier for people, organizations, and companies involved in creative activities. These are provided through ISNI registration agencies. Those are the main codes. There's other codes. I'm not going to lie to you, there's other codes. But I don't want you to feel like this is not doable, because it 100% is. You could do this. I believe in you. You're going to sign up to your right collecting societies. You're going to get on top of your codes. My other tip, as I said, remember to check all your admin is aligned and in order, because if the code doesn't match the code for your bank account or for your identifier number or for the collecting society, when the song is played, there's just going to be like a glitch in the system and it's not going to make its way through to you. So it is really important to get on top of your admin. I usually recommend to people to set a sexy collecting society admin day in your calendar once a year and just log into your account and check, because there'll be things on there that you might be like, I definitely played this festival and I can't see it, so maybe I need to check. And then if you get stuck, you can just call them. I know nobody rings anybody, I know, but the collecting society works on behalf of its members. So if you join, you're a member and they work for you. And they both, PPL and PRS, are really good. They have contacts, you can call them, you can email them, and they will help you if there is a problem. And it's really important. It's your job to be on top of that. But if you get stuck, they are there to help you. You can make it fun. You can gather your other creative friends and be like, let's do an admin night. I don't know. But essentially, I've done this with people. I've sat down with artists and been like, let's go through. And I promise you, by the end of that session, they had more money in their bank account than they did at the start. So it can be a really effective way to make sure that you're getting paid and make sure you're actually collecting the money that you're due. So one thing that is important to maybe understand in the broader context of things is that, generally speaking, the music industry does have a data problem. So we know that data is not always being allocated where it should be, and it's not always making its way through all of the channels that it needs to in order for everyone to get paid and be credited for the work that they have made. However, There was the UK streaming inquiry that took place, and we'll talk about that in way more detail in another episode. But one of the aspects of the streaming inquiry did look at data. And in the 2026 UK Intellectual Property Office report, it summarised that multiple writers are often involved in creating a song, but writer shares and metadata are not always agreed at the point of the creation. So that's really normal. Like, often people will just create a song and not think about the song split, not think about how the royalty share is going to happen, because they're there to make music and they really don't think about the admin and the data. But if you don't have that conversation and you don't decide who's getting what, no one actually can get paid. When you log into the collecting society and you put the multiple writers in, for example, on the songwriter side in PRS, if you're like, I've decided I've got 30%, but I didn't actually discuss it with anyone else, you can't get paid until the total adds up to 100. So it's really important that that conversation happens. Otherwise, nobody actually gets anything from the collecting society. So not agreeing the shares can delay in the registration or the allocation of identifiers, which is ultimately getting paid. So that's something that you can do to help with the situation. However, there are kind of more systemic issues with the data and these annoying identifiers in that they're not universally recognized. They can be hard to access, and there are systemic issues in the music industry around data that are it's not on you. And if you find it difficult, you're not alone. Working with the identifiers can be really hard and really complicated, but it is something that is recognised by the industry. So what came out of the streaming inquiry? There is this report, but also the key players, the record labels, the publishers, the streaming platforms, did come together and agree baseline principles to help improve the situation with data in the music industry. So hopefully things will get better. But this is a prime example of something that we all struggle with in the music industry, keeping up with the identifiers, keeping up with the collecting societies and all of the admin. And there is like, that's time consuming, right? To keep on top of all of that. But it's also part of a bigger issue that we do need to hold these companies to account when they are in control of that data and maybe not following through appropriately. So some of it's on us, like we need to be on top of our data and our admin, but also we need to make sure that that data and that information is getting through to the channels that it needs to, and that the system needs to be of service. It needs to work. So where you are having problems, it's important to voice that, because actually you're not alone and things aren't going to change unless we make a big fat noise about it. So remember, find out which collecting societies apply to you and your work and go and sign up if it's right for you.
Okay, so that's it for today. Thanks for listening. Follow Whose Song Is It Anyway on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts for more. And I'll keep on breaking it all down for you. In the meantime, you can grab a copy of my book, Copyright in the Music Industry, your go-to practical guide for navigating copyright and IP with clarity and confidence. I've linked to it in the show notes for you. See you in the next episode.